So let's say we start with some video. We can open that folder up. Just going to drag it down a little bit. Now let's take a look at this video right here. This is actually some raw footage from a pretty famous YouTube personality, and this is an uncut video that he did, where he uploaded the entire 30 minutes raw footage to show how many mistakes he makes and how much time and effort it takes to edit 30 minutes down into 6 minutes that are worthy of being uploaded online for people to watch. So if we want to look at it, all we have to do is we can double click it, and now it's going to show up into our source window. Now remember, it's only in the source window at this point. It's not part of our actual project. There are 3 primary ways that you can edit footage. There's of course more than that, but there's 3 basic ones. Now each one of them has a specific time when it's most suited to use, but really when it comes down to it, you can edit in a way that feels natural to you and whatever you feel most comfortable with. But of course we'll show you all 3 of those ways and show you when you should technically be using each of them. Now as we're looking at this video, we can go through, this is our play bar, and we can scrub through it and watch what's going on. We can of course see the time on it. You're noticing as we're going through, you can also see what's happening, of course because it's not playing at the moment, you can see what's happening with the audio levels on it. And of course we have the regular video controls down here, and this works just like any other video player, whether it be YouTube, QuickTime, anything. Just turn that down a little bit. Turn that all the way down. So now it's playing, and of course you can skip around. And of course now it's playing. You can stop it. Now one of the things that is cool about these players that is a little bit different from say like QuickTime. Now even in QuickTime, YouTube, anything like that, if you're playing you can also use the spacebar to start and stop. You don't just have to use the play button itself, you can just use the keyboard. But what is really cool about these programs is you can actually use the arrow keys on your keyboard to move the video 1 frame at a time. So as you can see, I'm actually moving the video 1 frame at a time to the right or forward, and that just helps you be precise in editing what you want. So using this idea of being able to scrub through the footage, we're going to show you the very first way to edit, which is basically choosing what parts of this big long clip that we want to use. Because for example, we can pull this entire clip down into the timeline, which I'll show you how that works. We can pull that down, and this right here is, if you remember I said, if your video files happen to not be the exact same setting as the project, it asks you, do you want to change it? I'm going to say yes, change it so that it fits. If I were to say no, all that's going to happen is it'll work. You're just going to have to do something called rendering, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. So if I bring it down again, I'm going to say change it. So now it goes through and it's going to play for me. If you see this, this clip is very, very, very long. And if I just wanted to use a very small part of it, it's a nuisance to have to go through the entire timeline to find the clip that I want. You see, it can just be very complicated to do that. So if you have a really long clip, it's a lot easier to use the in and out points up in this window. So we're just going to get rid of this for now and come back up to our source window. So now that we're in our source window, we can pick what parts of this clip we want to use. Now let's just say we're going through it, and let's just randomly say I want this part right here, where he grabs his guitar. This I want in my project. So all of this stuff that we went through before, all of the first 11 minutes, I don't want any of that, which by the way you also can scrub through this way, actually pulling the time. I don't want any of that. So what you're going to do is you put your play bar where you want that clip to start. It doesn't have to be 100%, but I'm going to use my keyboard to do that. And I'm going to say right there. On that silly face is exactly the moment I want this clip to start. So I set my play bar at that exact moment. I come down to this button right here, which is called the Mark In button. If I click it, what happens is we'll see all of a sudden this little line showed up, and you can actually move it if you want to. So let's say you put it in the wrong spot, you can move it so you're not married to it. If you only put a mark in button, what it's going to do is it's going to tell the program that you want from that point all the way to the end of the project. I don't want that though. Let's say that I want just to this point. Now I hit the other button called Mark Out, and a second line shows up. And again, you can adjust these and move them around if you want to. But now the computer knows that I only want from this point to this point. So now when I grab that clip and drag it into my timeline, so remember, by dragging it into your timeline, you're making it part of your actual project. If I drag it into the timeline, now it's there. Now it's part of the project itself. And notice it only brought down the part that I wanted it to. Now, a couple of real quick things, I'm just going to delete that, about bringing these down. As I bring this down, you notice I can put the clip anywhere on the timeline. It doesn't have to be at the beginning. Always make sure, though, that you do drag your clips to the very beginning of the timeline. And the reason for this is when you finalize your movie and you actually turn it into something that you can put on DVD or upload to Facebook, it's going to export, it's going to create every single thing that's on the timeline. So if you have 20 seconds of black, of nothing before your project starts, it's going to export 20 seconds of nothing. So you make sure that you bring it all the way to the beginning. Another thing that often happens is people will drop their clips off in, say, video track 3 or in audio track 3. That technically is okay. It doesn't really matter what audio track or video track you're in. It's going to play the same way, but it's generally recommended to put them in tracks 1 first, because once we start doing something called layering, which basically means that we're going to stack tracks on top of each other so you can look at multiple things at once or you can hear multiple things at once. Once we start doing that, if we've started on a high track, it doesn't really give us much place to go. So you always want to just start on the earlier ones or the lower ones just to make it a little bit simpler for you. All right, so that was the very first way that you can edit, is simply by using the in and out points and dragging your clips down. Now, once you've added one set of in and out points, you can add multiple other ones. You're not stuck with just that one. So if I were to come here, I could add more in and out points, drag down more clips, and it just makes your clip a lot more manageable. Now, why this is convenient is anytime you have a super long clip like this, you're not going to want to sit there and watch the entire thing down on the timeline. Instead, you can just scrub through and find what you're looking for.